Hey everybody, welcome back. Like the other video, I'm uploading another one because somehow somebody put children only, children okay for children view. But I noticed when you do that, you can't comment.
It's not my phone.
But we like to have comments. It's always good.
I've never done
I
my
just
own video, so I wouldn't even know where to begin. He
right.
asked me to do a video, guys, and I'm like, yeah.
Never mess up somebody's hair or makeup.
He might want to get me on and
Right.
upload the video. I don't know any of that.
Right.
Nor do I want to.
So, anyways, like in the video, if anybody watched it, this is what I was talking about, coming on here, letting her do her testimony. And it's kind of going to go from her childhood all the way up.
Quickly, through some of it.
Quickly, she said.
Through some of it. I am 51 years old,
She's already done.
That's a long testimony.
It was so fast, she's already done. So great for tuning
part
in.
Part 3, Part 4, Part 5.
That's what mine ends up going. But anyways, and kind of go into where she surrendered her life into Jesus and what he's been doing in her life. And, just one of the things too, I may add a little things here and there, but, pay close attention to even after the cancer thing and what Jesus did and to show his appearance and that he's going to take care of you. That's really, that impacted my life, just listening to how Jesus makes sure that she was provided for. The other part is taking someone that watched every penny. That's gonna give a lot of people, to me, was going, wow, how do you get out of that? And it took her a while, honestly.
Yeah, it did.
So here you go. It's on, this roller coaster ride. I like to, you just got to be patient, and your adrenaline starts going as you climb. We sometimes come down fast, and sometimes it's slow. But again, if you're going to leave comments on this, please be respectful, because if not, I'm going to delete it off. And like I said, another one. I'm just done coming against people's comments.
Yeah.
I'm just going to start just taking them totally off there, because it's not that I don't want to come against it. I'm just tired of it. It's just ridiculous. It takes a lot out of it.
It doesn't lift up the Lord, so it doesn't glorify him, and that's what we're here to do.
Right. But in the same token, at least I hopefully taught you guys how to defeat a devil when it comes at you. I have no problems with that, but it's not about that. It's about giving God glory. So that being said, I'm gonna turn this over and let this lady right here. Oh, sorry, Georgie. Come on though. I'm not a lady. She's a lady. Anyways, it's all hers, guys. Okay. Here you go.
Well, Nelson has told me a few times that people have wanted to know, how did I become saved, born again? Wanted to know my testimony, and I think this phone is falling a little bit.
It does. You probably
have to keep fixing it. Tighten that up a little bit.
No, it's this bar here.
Yeah. So anyway.
Just let me know, and I can fix it. Is it too high?
No, it's fine. There you go. So anyway, well, like Nelson, my parents were not Christians whatsoever. My dad and we grew up in the same area in Akron, Ohio, and a small part of it was what they called Kenmore. And to know that area, it's pretty rough. It's always been rough. Well, my parents, grew up in that area as well. And they got married young because my dad got drafted into Vietnam. And so they eloped. They went to Michigan, got married, and because I think the age was a factor. And so my dad went to Vietnam, and I was born when he came back. And in the Akron area, the number one place to get a job was the tire companies, because this is where Akron was nicknamed was the Akron the tire the rubber company of the world, the rubber capital of the world. There you go. And so we had Goodyear here, we had Firestone, we had BF Goodrich, and I don't know if there's any more, but I know there was those three main, and there may have been four, but I know there was three. My dad worked for Firestone coming out of the war. My uncle worked for B.F. Goodrich. I think my grandpa retired from Goodyear. So, for generations, that's what people did here in this area. Many moved to this area to do so, because they could work for the tire companies and get a job. So many people out of Vietnam came to this area. Well, unfortunately, what came to this area also was biker gangs. We had the Hells Angels here. We had the Chain Gang was one that my dad was, affiliated with a lot.
Misfits.
The Misfits, right?
Warlords.
Well, the Warlords, I don't remember them so much in this area. They might have been. But I do remember they were in Florida a lot. So anyway, the biker gangs were here. And my dad hung out with quite a few of them. A lot of them, they went to high school with, and they were friends in high school. And so coming out of the war, he went back into his friendships with them. And so, needless to say, my parents fought a lot. My dad, unfortunately, was, violent with my mom, and my brother and I had seen some not so pleasant activities when we were growing up. And during fights with them, we would get sent to our rooms. My brother's bedroom was right next to mine. And so we would talk through vents, and my brother was a year older than me, and so I kind of always looked to him as my the person who comforted me through those violent times. I seen my dad beat my mom. I've seen him put a gun to her head and drag her up the steps by her hair. My brother too saw that, was a witness to that. And so we've seen some not so good times, a lot of drinking, a lot of funerals with the bikers that he hung out with. Drinking and driving motorcycles are a deadly combination, obviously. And so, I can remember one guy, we were there almost every weekend playing with his kids since they played cards and drank, and now we're going to his funeral. And so that was a hard time growing up. I remember this little church in Kenmore. It's still there, by the way. It was Nelson and I. It's funny how Nelson's life, in my life growing up, crossed many paths. And this little church, he lived across the street from it, in that home, in that house that, wasn't so good for him when he was a young adult. I think, wasn't that the house, Nelson, that was, okay.
Yes.
So the one where it was a lot of Satanistic activity and worshiping going on there. There was this little church across the street. Well, that was a little church that my mom took me to that I remember a few times, and going in the basement. And I only remember a couple of times. And then fast forward to my teenage years, I remember watching the neighbors get on this bus, and they were going to church every day. And I wanted to get on that bus and go to church. And so anyway, it got to the point to where my brother and I were allowed to go to vacation Bible school as long as he walked me, and it was quite a hike. So my brother had to walk me to church because I wanted to go to church, and a lot of times my parents didn't want to get up, so my brother would walk me in on Sunday mornings. We went to vacation Bible school. That's where I learned. I really remember the vacation Bible school teacher holding up this picture of Jesus and just talking about love, and I wasn't receiving that kind of love at home. And so I was quickly drawn to this, and we would have to say a Bible verse or memorize a Bible verse. And I think by the end of the week for that vacation Bible school, you got a treat or you got some kind of reward. Well, it was the 23rd Psalm, and thank God that the Lord had me memorize that when I was a kid, because that sure did help me growing up through the years. That even today. It's one that I go to frequently in the mornings and speak out or pray it into for Nelson and I. Psalms 23, Psalm 91, Psalm 51, Psalm 27, 37. These all come to my mind because these are great. All the Psalms are good. All God's word is good. Some you get to know God more than others. Some you get to know the ways of God. If you will be humble, God will do this. If you have the fear of the Lord, it's the beginning of wisdom. To have to be humble and to trust in God, and this He'll do this, make Him your delight, and He will direct your steps. I mean, there's so many conditional scriptures that I started learning, and I started coming across. I'm like, wow, I want to be humble. Wow, I want to trust God. I want Him to direct my steps. I want Him to be the delight of my life. I want this and I want that. So I started praying for it. And, it wasn't too long after giving my life to the Lord in the Vacation Bible School that I don't remember going to church after that, after a while. I don't remember. I was young. And then it was, later on in my teenage years, I was about 13 at this time. A friend of mine, her mom was a very strong Christian. They went to her at, she required her kids to go to church Wednesday nights and Sunday mornings, and I think they might even went Sunday nights as well. Her dad was not a Christian. He was a truck driver, so gone quite a bit. Yeah, he was. And so anyway, she invited me to this lock-in. Youth groups have a lot of activities, and I think it's wonderful. Well, this was a lock-in, and they kept you overnight, and you weren't allowed to go to sleep. You just stayed up, and it was a lot of activities in the church. And I gave my life to the Lord that day. Well, I was on drugs by then. I was 13, and I was already smoking marijuana, drinking alcohol, doing other drugs, whatever we could kind of get our hands on. It wasn't the hard stuff like, I never knew what meth or cocaine or anything that was until way further down the line. But, marijuana was bad enough. And acid and things that just, how in the world does a 13-year-old, 14-year-old get a hold of this stuff? But it's very, Satan will use his little tricks and schemes to get this into a child's hands. So don't think that 13 is too young for your children. It's not. 8 years old, from what I understand, is not too young these days. So, Nelson had made a video with, I watched the video with him and on the Common Sense America podcast with Eden Hill. And he was talking about what to be, make sure that you are looking to see what your kids are into on your phones and who they're hanging out with and what they're doing. And I look back on how I was raising my own kids, I unfortunately, my life was kind of back and forth in the Lord. And when God tells us in His Bible, in His Word, to raise your kids up in the Lord, I know why, because your kids aren't going to go through this back and forth behaviors and drugs and alcohol, not thinking anything wrong about it. I can remember my friend and I were talking, we just reconnected after many, many years, and she was reminding me of things and I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, I remember that now that you said it. We one time we were drinking beer thinking that it gave you a better tan. This is the kind of stupid stuff that kids believe, and they do it. You tell somebody something and they believe it, and here we are hiding beer and laying out in the sun getting a tan. How stupid is that? But we did it. And anyway, I'm not bragging. It's stupid, but this is my testimony. And this is what I was into as a young adult. My brother and I had lacked a lot of discipline, a lot of guidance, and our parents were back and forth arguing. They were unfortunately married and divorced to each other 4 times. I'm not even kidding you. The last time, I think it lasted a few weeks, and they tried. I think they had it annulled because they weren't even married very long. And then by this time, we both had my brother was in the military, and I had already moved out on my own. Couldn't, you can only. I was graduated by 17, and I moved out at 17. So, anyway, I did give my life to the Lord at 13 or so, and got baptized. And for a few months, there was a 360 transformation with me. The Lord really did. It was. As a matter of fact, the drugs were done. No desire. I have no desire for the drugs or the alcohol, smoking, none of that. As a matter of fact, at that lock-in, I tore up the cigarettes that I had with me in my purse. I went to the bathroom after I felt so guilty to have them, and I tore them up in the girls' bathroom and threw them in the trash. And you know, and that's the kind of change that God was doing with me. And you know, it comes in, and the Holy Spirit comes in at the moment that you believe, is what the Bible says. And you know, I just look at it this way, kind of like give Satan the boot. You know, there's a new sheriff in town, so to speak. You know what I mean? And the Holy Spirit comes in and he cleans you up. And God says, "Come as you are." And you don't, you know, people think, "Oh, I gotta quit smoking first. I gotta quit drinking first." No, you don't. You come as you are. And if you're addicted, you come as you are. You know, and God will take care of that because He's way bigger than we can ever imagine. You know, that little addictions is nothing for Him. And you know, He wiped me away clean, and I had no desire for it. Well, unfortunately, that only lasted a few months, and you know, still hanging out with the same friends. Not so much the ones that were doing the drugs and stuff. But I had an older brother, and his friends were always coming over, and they were always smoking, and they were always listening to hard rock music, and so it's kind of like, you know, I just couldn't escape some of this, and I fell back into it, and let's see, actually before that though, my brother ended up coming to church, and we were. This is what happened. My brother came to church, and he gave his life to the Lord eventually, and both of us were going to the youth group, and well, we decided we were stayed the weekend. All of us youth kids stayed at our youth leaders. They were married, Cindy and Jerry. They would have us over on the weekends, and it was so much fun. And she was a hairdresser, so I learned how to cut hair. So I was doing all the kids in the neighborhood, my mom, my dad, you know, and so so I loved going over there. We would on Wednesdays after the youth group meetings, Wednesday nights, they would take us for pizza. So we'd go to Pizza Hut, and you know, we just had a great time. And well, one weekend we were talking about how this music, and they were wanting to know if anyone was willing, you know, to bring their albums, and we were going to see what they say. They wanted to show us what some of these messages were when you start playing them backward. You know, oh my gosh, people, I would never imagine. It's hard to imagine. It's hard to even understand how in the world does that happen. But these messages, these satanic messages, you know, on the old turntables, the old vinyl records, you play those backwards, and some of these messages were clearer than others. And I remember it was AC/DC records, and Ozzy Osbourne, and Iron Maiden, and you know, Led Zeppelin. You know, a lot of these is what my brother was listening to, and Pink Floyd, and so we took all of them, and we once you start hearing these horrible satanic messages, clear as day, and they were English, clear as day. It was an immediate fear that you had, and we start breaking them, and so we broke all of these records. We started cutting up concert shirts, and you know, because back then you could go to carnivals and you could get these concert shirts, Ozzy Osbourne, whatever, Motley Crue. Any and all concert shirts were pretty cheap back then. Concert tickets were cheap. You could go. You went to the concert to get a concert shirt. That was one of the main things that you did, and you wore it to school the next day. And it's kind of like when you go to a sports game, you know, Cleveland Browns, Ohio State, whatever, and you go to the game and you buy a T-shirt, especially if they were champions, you know, you want to wear that and kind of show, or bikers that go to Sturgis, and they get the T-shirts and they wear them. It shows the event, the year, and so anyway, we took those T-shirts and we cut them up, and so when my mom found out that my brother didn't have any clothes left, she was, needless to say, wasn't very happy. She was not a Christian, and so when she started getting to the point that we weren't going to be allowed to go to our youth group leaders anymore because of what we were doing, And so our youth leaders took my brother out, especially him, because that's pretty much all he ever wore. So he didn't really have any clothes left. And so they took him to and got him some clothes. The youth group leaders got him some shirts and some pants. And I mean, it's really nice that they did that. And so anyway, shortly after that, my mom got to the point where she wouldn't let us go to church anymore. And so that, unfortunately, it didn't take us long to go back into our old ways. And my brother at 17, he also graduated at 17. Our birthdays were in September. And he then went into the military. And, he ended up becoming an alcoholic pretty strongly. Got in a couple car accidents. And he ended up committing suicide at, I'd say about 2021. He got into this really, I think he was about 21. He got into this really bad car accident, and it was on Mother's Day, as a matter of fact. He totaled my mom's car, and what it come down to, neighbor, it ended up being, my dad and him were getting in these fights, and my dad, I can remember one time picking him up. He was a weightlifter, and my dad was, and he picked my brother up right in front of my face, picked him up from the ground and put him on the top bunk with one hand. Well, that was because he got an F and on his report card, and so my dad was kind of hard on him. And when he graduated high school, the graduation party that they had, there was alcohol, and so my dad allowed him to drink, and we were allowed to go into the bars with my dad. By then they were divorced, and we could he'd be at the bar and we could go in there and we could drink with him. I mean, it was crazy as it sounds, but back then I think you were allowed to drink if you were with your parent, and if you were 19, you were grandfathered in because the alcohol age limit had changed. It was before it was 21. I think it was 19. If you weren't 19, you could be with a parent. And then, so anyway, that's what happened. And so when my brother went into the Army, he was an alcoholic. By the time he got out, he got an honorable discharge. He got into an accident in the Army, drinking and driving. And needless to say, fast forwarding, he comes out of the Army, and he has this pretty bad drinking problem. And so him and my dad didn't get along too well. And so anyway, there was this car accident, and a neighbor saw the car that was basically, it sounds to me that my brother was trying to get away from this car, and this car hit him and put him in a spin, and he hit this telephone pole. And anyway, he didn't have a seatbelt on, and he was found underneath the glove compartment box of the passenger side with his arms hanging out the window. So he was in a coma, and he broke a lot of bones. One of the guardrail bolts went in through his kneecap. That had to be skin grafted. His pelvis was broken in 15 places, so he had to have these bars put in place. Small peg bars, and then these other bars that they would adjust these smaller pegs to, they were connected to. It was like this whole system going on. And so he was in pretty bad shape for a while, couldn't walk. He had brain damage, swelling on the brain. Like I said, he was in a coma. Had my uncle and I we had a last name that wasn't common. And so it just so happened, and this is how God worked things out. It just so happened at this hospital, my grandpa was in for lung cancer, and they both had the same last name, which wasn't common. And it was a Slovakian last name. And so they happened, my brother, I guess, was trying, as he was kind of in and out of consciousness, murmured his last name, and they were like, well, wait a minute, we have a person in here by that last name. And so they went up and asked if he had a grandson, and they said yes. And so they went on that information, looked it up in the phone book, found my dad, my uncle, and me, and because I had my maiden name at that point. And so anyway, my dad couldn't leave work yet. By law, there was only one or two of them there. He had to wait for somebody to come to relieve him. So my uncle and I ended up at the hospital, and we had come to identify my brother. He didn't have his ID on him, and so, like I said, he was in a coma in ICU, and so sure enough, it was him. And this went on for a few weeks, and he eventually got out. So fast forward about 8 months later, he was going back and forth. By then, my mom was remarried, and he was going back and forth in my stepdad's truck in a cot that were transporting him in because he couldn't sit and real well, and they couldn't transport him sitting, so they laid him in this cot in the back seat, and they would take him to the psychiatrist every once a week, I think it was. Anyway, the psychiatrist had told them it would be at least a year before they knew if this brain damage was going to be permanent or not. Well, he couldn't, in stressful situations, he wasn't handling stress very well. And so he had lost his job. And so 8 months, can you put this back up again? Yeah. I've got my top of my head all. So 8 months goes by. Perfect, thank you. And he gets laid off because he went back. He was able to go back to work. My uncle got him a job, and he ended up getting laid off. And so anyway, he got into another car accident. He didn't remember the accident, the first one, and so he took up drinking again and got into another accident. Was going to have to report to court on Monday. He was going to go to jail. And he, called a friend of mine, her mom. She was like a mom to both of us. My best friend's mom. Them two dated, and that's how her and I became good friends. So anyway, he called her mom, and she talked to him for quite a while, trying to get him, he lied to her and said that he was leaving town. He didn't want to go to jail. Well, unfortunately, she did try to talk him out of it, and he went over to my dad's house, broke into the house, knew where the guns were, and loaded it, or no, it was loaded. And he broke up in my dad's gun case, took the gun out, and shot himself. Wrote this letter and said, I didn't do it because the gun was loaded. So he was going to do it anyway. So anyway, that was a horrible time for me. We were very close, very mentally traumatic for me. It took many years to get through that. And but one thing, my brother, when we were right before he went into the military, my mom used to watch the Merv Griffith show. It was kind of like Oprah. It was very much like Oprah.
That was forever ago.
Yeah, but that was every time we come home from school, that was on, and she would watch it, and we'd have to wait till she was done watching that before we could watch anything else. So anyway, I think at this point Oprah was new, and she's on the scene now. And I was watching, I think, Oprah, and they had this lady on there with this near-death experience. She had went to heaven, and she was telling her experience. Well, my brother didn't believe it. Of course, this is before he got into his accident. And he didn't believe it, and he was making fun of me for believing it. And he's like, oh, they pay these people to say those things. And he would laugh, and I just try to ignore him because I believed it. And so anyway, when he got into his car accident, he couldn't get out of bed because his pelvis was broken in 15 places, right? And he had a bolt that went through his kneecap, so they had to do repair on that, skin graft and everything. So they had this little triangle thing that he was able to pull himself up. If he scooted down in bed, he was able to use that to pull himself up. Well, one of the family members or a friend had brought him, I think Mountain Dew was his pop of choice back then, and brought him a case of Mountain Dew, and they didn't think nothing of it, and they set it over on the side of the room where there was a sink. And they just set it there because there was really nowhere else to put it. Maybe the nurses were there, and they didn't want to interrupt. I don't know, but that's where it was. And he was not really, I guess, aware of the fact that he would kind of come in and out of amnesia, from what I remember. He didn't remember the accident. He had these behavior differences, and I guess it was common with the brain injury. So anyway, I guess he tried to get to that Mountain Dew and didn't realize he couldn't walk. Well, when he went to take a step or try to get out of bed, he collapsed, and I guess he was like excruciating pain. Well, I had a Christian aunt who came in at the same time, and they were trying to get him to get back in bed, and he, so she came in to see him, and I don't know if it was because of the excruciating pain it made him think about his event and what happened to him in the car accident, but he was telling her how he had went to heaven and how he had seen his guardian angel and named her by name. I think it was Elizabeth. But we're going back many, many years, so I'm not quite sure if that's the name, but I do remember him in quite detail, telling her about all this. I mean, she's the one that told us about it. Now, remember, she was a Christian, so she wouldn't make any of this up. You could trust what she was saying to be true. So anyway, he described God as being, now, he didn't say that he meant Jesus, but he described God as you're not able to see God, which we all know he's spirit, God the Father. But how you knew it was God is that you felt love. The whole atmosphere of heaven there was love, and so I remember him talking about like he couldn't go any further than these gates. He couldn't actually go in, but he was standing on the outside of the gates, and so anyway, let's fast forward. He's at home now. He's out of the hospital. He goes to my mom and stepdad's house where they're taking care of him. We're all kind of taking shifts. And this is where I realized I wanted to be a nurse, because there was a nurse that would come and she would take care of his knee wounds and she would show me what she was doing. I was really interested in it. When I was there, I'd go over there once a week and do laundry. And, I knew that I wanted to be a nurse at this point. So, my brother, him and I were talking about it one day with her doing laundry, and I was like, nobody was home, so I could kind of plug his, start asking questions. I wanted to pick his brain a little bit about this near-death experience. Remember, I'm watching Oprah. He's making fun of me years ago, and I'm very interested in what my aunt said that he saw. So, he didn't even, he was fascinated by the fact that I'm asking him these questions. And he didn't remember, but I was telling him, I said, well, Aunt Colleen told us this is what you told her. He's like, really? And he didn't remember. But he wasn't opposed to it. He was, wow, like he was so interested in it. And, I don't know what happened from that point on with him, but I do know that he went back into drinking, and it was only 8 months later that he took his life because of that second car accident. And like I said, his brain wasn't fully healed. He couldn't handle stress very well, and he would just shake, and he just couldn't, his brain, he just wasn't him. And so anyway, he took his life, and by this time I was with my kids' dad. We were, I don't think we were married yet, and we were just dating, but had been living together. And so when he got the phone call, it was right before Christmas. It was December 7th. And I would put up my Christmas tree. I had my son Jason. He was born. I was engaged to a guy from when I worked at McDonald's from high school. He didn't go to my high school, but he came to the McDonald's, because the high school was right next door that he went to. And he would always come through to McDonald's, and that's how I met him. So anyway, we were engaged to be married when I got pregnant. And I had my son, and, he through adultery, and we didn't end up working out. And then, I guess I should touch on this point real quick. My son, when I was pregnant with him, I was staying with my dad. I think I was at my dad's first. And he was remarried as well to this lady that he knew from high school. And, she had 3 kids living there as well, so it was a small house, and here I am now pregnant. And not that he probably, my dad and I weren't really, he wasn't really a dad, kind of like a loving dad, a Christian type dad. Let's just say he wouldn't have gotten the Dad of the Year award anytime soon. I told you a little bit of his background. He wasn't very loving dad. I never really got close with him. And so here I am now pregnant. And, he was better at this point. I don't know, actually, was not married to this lady. She hadn't moved in yet with her 3 daughters. And, him and he was okay with me staying there while I was pregnant, but he was very clear to the fact that he did not want me to have this child. He did not want me, back then being a single mom or having a child out of wedlock wasn't, it was worse with our parents' generation, but it wasn't so good with my generation either. It was kind of like taboo. You didn't do that. And here I was, pregnant with out of wedlock. And so he was telling me I needed to put this child up for adoption and needed to have a better home. I didn't have no way to even live on my own yet. I didn't have a job. Back then they didn't hire pregnant people. I was 6 months pregnant at this point. My dad made me get on welfare, and so he was like, you can stay here as long as you put this child up for adoption. Well, my mom was remarried. She never really invited me to come live with her either. I didn't really have anywhere to go, and I couldn't make it on my own either. So fast forward, I'm in the maternity ward, and I'm about to have this child. Who I did go through the adoption agency. My dad went with me every week. I picked out the family, and so here I am having this child. And I wasn't supposed to be on the maternity ward because back then this was all real new. Your maternity, you stayed in the same room all the time. You had a child in the same room. They called them birthing suites. Now it's very common. Back then it wasn't so common. And this was new. This was the only hospital in the area that had these birthing suites. Well, I was in one of them, and I wasn't supposed to be. I was supposed to have a regular room, go to the surgery room, have this child, go back, and he was to go to the nursery, and that was it. And the adoption family was to come and get him from the nursery, not me. Well, so when I had him, I was terrified. I was 19. I think I was just turning 20, and I'm faced with this lifetime decision, basically, that I'm going to have to live with. That my child is going to be adopted. And I'm a very loving person, and I have a huge heart. And the last thing I wanted to do was go through life wondering, what did my son look like? How's he being treated? What kind of parents does he have? Is he being treated well? Does he hate me as his birth mother? All these thoughts flowing through my head constantly. I just didn't even want to live. And I sure didn't want to have to go back to my dad's house without my son. So this nurse, I don't know who she was, but she did what she was not supposed to do, and she took a Polaroid picture of him, brought it remember I'm in a birthing suite, so I didn't have to leave my room. She brings this picture of my son to me, and it was called. He didn't have a name, because I didn't give him a name. I think he was just Merkel with the last name, so I think they just put that on the baby card. Well, I knew at this point when I saw that picture, that's it. I'm going to get him. I'm done. I'm not doing this. If I worked at McDonald's as a teenager, and I knew that they put good food in those dumpsters. And I thought, if I have to live in a dumpster at McDonald's with this child, at least he'll be fed, and I will. I'll do whatever it takes to raise. I'm not giving this child. I'm not handing him over. I went down to the nursery and I got him. And one thing, I was also very strong, and I was a fighter. I was a fighter in high school. I was threatened by my dad a lot. When I switched high schools. So I could take this vocation. Well, one of the things was the only way I was allowed to stay at this high school, even go to this high school, is if I didn't get in any trouble fighting. So I was a fighter, but I was more sticking up for those who were bullied. I didn't just fight. I would have, it would be that if I saw you bullying somebody in school, then you were going to have to you were going to have to pick on me and not that person. I would stick up for him. And so here I am. I'm going to get my son. And I bring my son to my room, and I'm feeding him. I am, holding him. Just happier than I could ever imagine at being in my life. And remember, I didn't have much happiness growing up, and it kind of came and went, came and went, came and went. And I was not going to raise this child and allow him. I was really worried about him not having a good childhood, about having parents like I had. And so, and I get this phone call. It's my dad. And, well, he hears Jason in the background crying. And he's like, "What's that?" And I said, "What?" He's like, "It sounds like a baby crying." I was like, "Oh yeah, that's my son." He's like, why do you have him in your room? You're not supposed to." And I was like, I can't call those people. I just can't. And he's like, "You have to." I'm like, "You call them. I'm not calling them. They were the ones making me do this, I felt. You're the one saying I couldn't live with you unless I did this. Well, I just not going to live with you. But I'm not making that phone call. You call them." So he came up to I guess he called my mom, told her what was going on. So they came up, my mom and stepdad and him. And I just, by this time, the doctor, he was on the board of this hospital. And he was my doctor, mine and my brother. He delivered us. And he came to see me, see my last name on the patient list or whatever. And like I said, I didn't have a common last name. He knew that's who I was, and he came to visit me. And he knew what was going on. He sat down on the bed, at the end of the bed, and we talked for, oh gosh, that must have been an hour. And he was telling me all this stuff that's available for people. That he was telling me that half of Barberton, Ohio is just this little small city next to Akron. That's where this hospital was. We were close to that city too. And he was like, half of Barberton is on assistance. And he's like, you can get help with your baby. You can get help with living shelter. There's all kinds of help out there. And I was like, my parents never told me nothing about it. I didn't know anything. I didn't know there was any kind of help. All I knew is I had to give this child up for adoption. That was my only option. Well, this is all the Lord, I believe the Lord just orchestrating these events because of my innocence, and knowing what I was going to become later, I believe. So anyway, I keep him, and it doesn't take long. I get on the list of help for shelter. I get on AMHA, get a job. I'm doing pretty well. And I meet this man. Now we're together, and my brother commits suicide. So my son was about a year old at this point, almost a year. He was a couple months shy of being a year old. And this happened, my fiance at the time, who became my first husband and the father of my next two children. I had 3 children altogether. He gets the phone call of my dad telling me what happened to my brother. Well, I just, remember screaming and not, like paralyzed almost. And so that took a long time to get over. And so I ended up, we ended up drinking. I ended up drinking a lot, falling back into alcoholism. I think I still was drinking with this guy, that was I met him in a bar, actually. That's what it was. My dad was about to lose his job because my grandpa, who I told you was in the hospital, he died from lung cancer while my brother was still in the hospital. And my dad ended up just with my brother and his dad, just drinking way too much. He ended up almost losing his job. So I was going in there and making sure if I seen my dad's car at the bar after I get out of work, I would stop and make sure he got home. And that's where I met my first husband. So he ended up, fast forward, we get married, and I ended up getting pregnant with my daughter, my middle daughter. And he, let's see, he would cheat. I think he was cheating on me or something. He was an alcoholic. I mean, he would drink stuff the real hard stuff, and he would get real mean. And legit, I'm just going to tell you this one event because of my daughter. She was born like 3 weeks early. She had, he was abusive, but I think that it could have been worse because I think he had a fear of my dad, that my dad would not tolerate that. But this time he was so drunk, and we had been arguing because he didn't come pick me up from work. We only had one car, and my dad had to come get me. And so anyway, I was pregnant, and he kicks me in the stomach, and he had these cowboy boots on. So when he did that, my son was under the table screaming, crying, don't hurt my mom, don't hurt my mom. By then he was about 3 and a half maybe, somewhere around 3 or 4. And so after he kicked me in the stomach, I started noticing, like the next few days, I started noticing the fluid in my womb was leaking. And when I went to the doctor, he noticed, because they measure your belly and they do ultrasounds. Well, he noticed that my fluid was leaking, and because I told him what I was experiencing, and so I told him I fell. Well, I didn't want my husband to go to jail, and that we needed both paychecks, and so the last thing I wanted to do is have him go to jail, even though I really didn't want to be with him, but I couldn't make it on my own at this point either. So, needless to say, kind of trapped, and she. It was about 3 weeks before she was due. That it got so bad. Before that though, it got so bad that I became high risk. My pregnancy was high risk because I was losing so much fluid. That fluid keeps the baby, is what has the oxygen for the baby, and without enough fluid, I guess the baby doesn't have enough oxygen, and the baby can die. So I'm going in every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at this point. And so he gets to the point, and he's like, okay, we're going to have to just admit you now and induce you because you're losing too much fluid. It's putting the baby in danger of dying. So that's exactly what happened. She's born a few weeks early, and it went okay for a while. Our relationship was very up and down. He was just he was a cheater. He was alcoholic. It was nothing for him to start a fight and then take off and take the only car we had, take off, go to the bar. On this one time, he started a fight, and she was a baby. She wasn't but a few months old. I think she might have been able to sit in a high chair at this point. And I know she could because we were at this house that we were renting, and I have a picture of me feeding her in the high chair. And so we get in this argument, and we had this big glass ashtray, and he breaks it all over. It just shattered everywhere. And I was so mad. And so I start cleaning this up, and we start fighting, and he takes my hand, and he puts it through the door window, and it was glass. Well, he cut my hand. So I told him I'm calling the police. Well, I did. He took off. I knew he was going to the bar. And the person who showed up at my door was my brother's best friend growing up. I'll never forget it, Paul Hooper. And he was like, Darlene? And I was like, oh, no, great. It's a guy that grew up with me. I was like a sister to him. And, my brother's gone at this point. And so he actually took me down to the police station, even though he wasn't supposed to. Well, once he realized what kind of record he's like, do you even realize what you're married to? And he told me what was on this man's record, and I'm going, oh my gosh, figures. And I was like, oh geez, I'm married to this. Not so easy to get away from somebody when you're married to them. And now you have a child with them. and we financially I couldn't make it on my own at this point. Well, we ended up, he goes to jail for what he did. He went to, it was like a workhouse type place. And so a friend of mine that I was working with, by this point, I always did medical transcription to pay my way through nursing school. And once I went through nursing school, I at this point, nurses, we had moved to Florida and moved back by then. And nurses didn't make as much here in Ohio because you had like we when I graduated from nursing school, I was doing medical transcription, making more money than, and nurses, and when I was in nursing school, at Barberton Hospital, they were laying nurses off because they had so many students coming through. They didn't need their nurses. They were laying their RNs off. And so at this point in time, it wasn't a huge demand for nurses. And so I was doing medical transcription, making really good money. And a friend of mine said, why don't you just work at home? Because I wasn't working at home yet. And I said, what do you mean? She's like, you could do this at home. And there's companies who will hire you to do this at home. She worked for one part-time at home herself. And I was like, really? And so she hooked me up with this company. I had to go to her house, and it was on their equipment. I did a few tests, this was my interview. And I had to do a few different kinds of hospital. One was a admission report. One was a discharge report. And I think emergency room. And so, anyway, you had to know a lot because, especially at the emergency room, they do emergency room procedures, they have medications, they have x-rays, tests, all kinds of stuff. So you had to really know your medical terminology to be able to, especially to work at home. Because you couldn't just grab your neighbor who was working next to you and say, hey, can you listen to this for me? You couldn't grab your supervisor, can you listen to this for me? You had nobody to listen to it. So anyway, I'd been doing it long enough. Plus, I had the background of the nursing school that I had the terminology that I thought I would be able to do it. And so, sure enough, I get the job and I start working at home. They supplied with everything I needed. And well, this was a threat to my husband. Now I can take care of myself and I can take care of these kids. By then, I had, I think I had the third one by then. She was only a year apart from the second one. And so I had them back to back. As a matter of fact, they were like a year and 1 week to the day apart. They have the same, their birthdays are 1 week from each other on the same day in July. So, I'm thinking, okay, I can raise these 3 kids on my own. And my daughters were only like 2 and 3 at this point, and my son was 7-ish. And so he put water in my computer and trying to sabotage my job, really. So I was like, oh, great, now I'm going to be fired. And because when we got arguments, I didn't just, lay down and play dead and let him walk all over me, so to speak. I fought back. And at this point, I was going to leave him. He was leaving, or I was leaving. But I had the means now to take care of myself and take care of these kids. And sometimes you have to build that foundation a little bit before you can leave. You got to build that financial foundation. But I really believe, even though I wasn't having a very close relationship with the Lord, I think that because of my ignorance, because of my innocence and my ignorance, kind of both the same, and not knowing what I know now, of course, because I wasn't raised in a Christian home. I didn't know really anything, but I love the Lord. I can tell you, I love the Lord since I was a little girl, even though I didn't really know the Lord, if that makes any sense. It's like you're kind of born with this, or I'm not quite sure even to this day to really explain it, but I just know that when I was little, I wanted to go to church. My mom took me, like I said, and then as a young, before I gave my life to the Lord at 13, I went to that week's vacation Bible school. My brother would walk me. Then at 13, I received the Lord as a youth, got baptized, and now here I am. And I believe the Lord is making these ways for me. And this, I don't believe in coincidences. This was no coincidence that the Lord would have me be able to work at home doing medical transcription and take care of these 3 kids by myself. So sure enough, I got away from him, and it wasn't easy. I mean, he had me arrested for something I didn't do. When you are unequally yoked, there is a reason why the Bible tells you not to be unequally yoked. This man was, I remember calling him one time Satan. I really truly believed he was Satan in human form. You know, obviously I don't know that to be sure, but I remember I was pregnant and I called him Satan.
Same one. She said she prayed to go to hell. People, this is the same guy.
Right? But he was evil to me, and I cheated on me. I mean, I had a horrible. I mean, my neighbor, I couldn't walk out the door without him flirting with my neighbor, the lady across the street, the lady next door. It was just like a constant battle. I was like, he wanted everybody else but me, I think, and so. I just couldn't take it anymore. I got to the point to where I was developing this hatred, and I just knew I needed to get out. And I was able to. Nobody wants to be a single mom of 3. Nobody. You don't wish that on yourself. But when you get to the point to where this man had me arrested now, remember he went to jail, and he did a lot of things to me. He put water in my computer, and thank God that all I had to do was make a police report. And they were willing, they sent me more equipment. They didn't know me. I wasn't with this company for many years, But they were willing, as long as I made a police report, to send me more equipment. And I was like, wow, this was just a godsend job at the time. And so sure enough, when he went to jail for putting my hand through the glass and everything, I knew that was my opportunity, and I knew that he was going to have to leave. And he put this water on my computer. You need to go, and I was going to file for divorce. And my grandpa said to me one day, my family couldn't stand him, and this was after I went to jail and had my kids taken. Now they couldn't take my son because he wasn't biologically his, but they did allow. When the cops came, he was cheating on me, and I came home from work. He was laid off because he was a roofer. And the neighbor across the street was a girl I went to high school with. It just happened to be a cousin of his by marriage. And we were like, when we moved in, she had already lived there. We moved in, she was like, wow, that's not a coincidence either, that her and I were really good friends in high school, and now she's my neighbor. And she hated him. She was his cousin by marriage, and they had kind of grown up for a few years in the same household, and she could not stand him. He was so nasty. So anyway, she was a stay-at-home mom, and her husband was a truck driver, and so she's watching on her front porch, while I'm at work, watching my husband, who's there with the 3 kids, kind of flirting with their neighbor who just moved in. And he was going over there, sitting on their porch, and laughing it up. And she was just like shocked. You're doing this to Darlene while she's at work. And so anyway, she came over one day, and he wasn't there, and she's telling me what's going on. And I'm thinking, okay, well, doesn't surprise me. He's cheating on me with the neighbor. And so I confront him. I'm determined I'm leaving tonight. And I'm upstairs, and when he came in, she was there. Him and I got into this argument. I wasn't one that I should have just kept my mouth shut, but it wasn't real easy for me to keep my mouth shut of the multiple times he had cheated on me, and the things he had done to me. So I was like, okay, I am leaving. And so we get in this argument. I confront him. He's cheating with the neighbor. Of course, he denies it, of course. And so I was like, you know what? I'm not even going to sit here and fight with you. I'm leaving. So I go upstairs, and it just so happened she's, it's summertime. We had our windows open because we didn't have air conditioning in this house. We were renting this house. And our house faced her house. Well, she could see our bedroom faced her house. And she could see me walking back and forth. She knew our house well enough. She knew I was in a closet getting clothes. And she could see me crossing the window. And so I was getting, work clothes out so I could I was going to go to my mom's for a few days. Well, he decides, he's down on which I didn't know. He was down in the window, in the front door, because the front door was open, because like I said, it was hot and we didn't have air conditioning. And so he didn't know that the lady across the street was watching all this, and she could hear him because he was talk kind of loud. And he's on the phone with 911, had hit himself with this conch shell that we have in Florida. And it was a big ceramic type, they had made it into this ceramic decorative piece. And I didn't know, but he had hit himself and he had blood coming down his face. And, my friend's watching this, and he's on the phone with 911 claiming that I am attacking him. And so anyway, they come, and I'm upstairs, and police, I can hear something going on downstairs. And so Miss Miller, can you come down here? And I was like, okay, sure. So I go downstairs. I'm thinking, what in the world? And he's got this gash in his forehead, and he's claiming that I did it. Well, this was right after the O.J. Simpson issue, when they made that new law that you didn't have to prosecute your spouse if they are abusing you, that the state would take over. And so that's exactly what happened. And I was to leave, and I was going to have to appear in court. I was like, okay. So I grab my son, I grab my clothes, and I go to take my daughters. Now it's late by this time. And I think it was like 10, 11 o'clock at night. And I go to get my daughters who were asleep. Now they were young. And, the police would not let me take the two girls. And because he was saying no, that I couldn't take them. So it was basically his word against mine. And because it was so late and they were already in bed, the cops weren't allowing me to wake them up and take them. As he's claiming to be this victim. So, somebody's calling in, Nelson.
All right.
So anyway, so I have to leave. My son and I leave. And there was this lady at my work who I didn't really know very well, but she was willing to take me and him in. And, this was devastating, to say the least. I don't think there's a word I could describe how awful this was for me. And, I can't take my babies, and who was a year. I just had the third one. She wasn't even a year old. My other one was a year old. And I can't take my babies. I am devastated. And I'm like, oh, if I could, this couldn't be torturous enough. And I just remember crying for days, not knowing what to do. And I think I was praying. And I remember my mom took me, she had kind of like this sixth sense about her. And she was like, I just have a feeling, because she would take me, I would beg her, since he didn't know her car, and he was thinking he'd be at work. Once a week, her, my grandma, and I would get together and go to lunch. And so my mom picked me up, and I thought, Mom, take me over to the house. I knew that my grandpa had made this little gate-like thing, and Jessica was able to go outside on the front little stoop, and the gate kind of blocked her in from coming off the stoop. And I just was hoping that she would be on that stoop in that area, and I get a glimpse of her. I couldn't. I even tried at night one time to go to the window and see if I could look through the window, but the window was too high, and the living room window, I couldn't see her that way. And so, I was just being tortured with this. And so my mom drove by. She's like, "You're gonna get in trouble. You're gonna get in trouble." I'm like, "No, Mom, just do it, please. I'll scrouch down. I just gotta see her." And sure enough, I seen her, and I just knew I would, and I was just bawling. I was like it was killing me on the inside, and I just wanted her so bad. Well, I had to go to court. Sure enough, darn if he doesn't bring those babies to court with him. And I have to go into the courtroom. It's just him and the two girls, the two babies. And I hear this, my 1-year-old, she's a year and a half by this time, she's almost 2, and she's like, "Mommy, Mommy, Mommy," screaming as I come in, screaming. The other one was just too young. She was still in a kind of a carrier, so she wasn't talking yet. And this one was. And she was just screaming, wanting me, putting her arms out. And, oh my gosh, I couldn't even look at her. I went over to the window in this courtroom, waiting for, this to take place, what was going to happen, what was I going to find out, what was going to happen to me. And I go to the window, and I'm just crying and crying. I can't even look at this child because it's Like my heart is being ripped out of my skin at this point. Here comes the bailiff, who was a female. She was livid. She come in and she just knew that he had done that for torment. This is what Satan does. And, people under the control of Satan, it's just pure evil. So sure enough, she makes him take these kids out. He wasn't allowed to have these kids in there. So my mom was out there, and the lady put the kids with my mom. And, remember, I have a restraining order on me. I'm not allowed to be so many feet around them because of that O.J. Simpson case. Any kind of divorce at this point, or proceedings of divorce, any kind of abuse, spousal abuse, you had to, you got a restraining order against you. I mean, if I walked into a grocery store and saw him and the kids, I had to leave. And so here I am, I can't touch her. I can't, nothing. And so I get, I go through this court, and they found me guilty because I didn't have a lawyer. I couldn't afford a lawyer. And I thought, this is all new to me. I didn't know that I would, if I didn't have a lawyer, they basically were going to convict me. And I told her, I said, and I remember what Paul, my brother's friend, told me at the police station. He's got this record. I never had a record. This person, I'd never been in any trouble with the law. And I begged this woman, begged her, and I thought, she's a female judge. She's gonna have compassion. Well, no, she didn't, or at least she didn't show it. And it was about the law. It wasn't about me, whether she believed me or not. She had to uphold the law. And again, I had no advocate. I had no lawyer, and I didn't think I needed one. I couldn't afford one, but I was telling the truth. That's all I needed to do is tell the truth, and she was going to know that I was telling the truth. Well, it didn't work that way. And so, sure enough, she convicts me. And, technically, I am still married to him, right? So it got to the point to where that hearing right there was just basically for me to plead. What was I going to plead? And I, of course, said, I'm not guilty. And so let's fast forward. I get to the point the lady can't have me and my son staying there anymore. My ex-husband takes the kids, and he takes them over to my dad's house because I don't know if he just couldn't take care of them anymore because he was on unemployment and it was running out and he didn't have any money. And so he took the kids over to my dad. He said, here, she can have them back. And I was like, oh, no, he's not going to get me in jail because of this restraining order. So I'm like, I can't. My dad told me to come pick up my kids. I said, I can't. I have a restraining order. I can't come near them. So he has to get that lifted off of me. So he did. Well, he was willing to do that. And now it gets to this point. Oh, I'm so sorry, and I love you, and they do this and they play with your minds. It's because I've never been through this before. And I wanted to believe him. I can't. I want my kids back. So needless to say, I believe him and or at least give him this chance. I thought, wow, surely he's making things right. Surely he is remorseful. Who could do this to their wife, and not be remorseful? It was a desperate attempt to get me to stay, and it backfired. And so maybe he was telling the truth. So I decided to, I didn't really have a whole lot of choice. We get back together. Well, I have to go to court. He takes me to court, makes me late, and I get the female judge, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh. She tells me that I'm convicted. Long story short, I got convicted. He's standing right next to me, and I'm going, now I got to wear this ankle bracelet. I got to pay each day that I'm on this house arrest, and I've got this, person over here who didn't come clean. I thought for sure he'd come clean, say I lied. I did this stuff. She never hit me with this conch shell, and he didn't. He played along with it. I'm like, oh, great. Now I got to go home with this guy. My mom's out there. My stepdad came in with me, and I'm like, so we go out to this hallway, and my mom's like, oh, it's all over. She didn't think I was going to get convicted either. I got convicted. I go out in the hallway, and my mom's like, oh, yeah, she just assumed that I didn't get convicted. And I snapped at her. I'm like, I got convicted. They convicted me. I have to, do house arrest, and I have to wear this ankle bracelet, and I can't go anywhere. And Thank God I worked at home. I've got so much time to go pick up my kids from school and get them back home. I cannot, I got like 15, like a half hour window to go get my kids, get them back home. And if I'm late, I could be going to jail. And so anyway, and I'm going, this is my husband. You're married to this evil thing. And he comes out and he says, he's got the nerve to say, oh, well, look at it this way. This is a new day, a new chapter of our life. And I'm like looking at him like he's got some, I can't even believe what I'm hearing here in the hallway of this courthouse. You just had me convicted for something. You didn't speak up to the truth. And you're going to tell me, oh, this is a new chapter of our life. And like, what? So I go off. And well, my mom's like, Darlene, be quiet. You're gonna go to jail. And I'm like, screaming at him. You just had me convicted. You didn't speak the truth. And now I gotta go home with this monster, right? Well, eventually, finally get to my divorce. And my grandpa finally offers me the money because I didn't have the extra money. Back then it was like $1,000 to retain an attorney to go through a divorce. And so I did just that. We got separated. We got in this big fight and we separated. And he went to actually Florida to stay with his sister for a little bit. Well, that was my opportunity. And my grandpa said, I'll pay for your divorce if you'll go through with it. If you'll just promise me you won't go back with him. And because he's a monster. He's a monster to you and he's a monster to these kids. So sure enough, I took him up on his offer and went to an attorney. This attorney was willing to basically go behind his back. We had to do a 30-day, put it in the newspaper, so to speak, but he put it in the legal news. He did it legally, maybe not so ethically, but he did it legally, and I got my divorce, needless to say. So, fast forward, I end up buying this house, and I'm doing medical transcription, and I end up going back to school as the kids got older. They were able to pretty much take care of themselves at this point, middle school, late middle school, high school. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go back to school and I wanted to be a surgical assistant. And so I did. I went back to Akron. I went to Akron U. I did full-time. And I was working full-time. But my job they were just a wonderful company to work for. I could, as long as, back then you had to do 40 hours to get insurance. And they didn't care how I did. I couldn't go on the night shift because you got paid more. But I could do half the night shift and half the day shift or whatever it was because you got paid higher for the second shift and the third shift. But if I stayed mostly on my shift, my pay wouldn't change, and they were okay with that. So I was able, they would let me clock in, clock out, clock in, clock out, clock in, clock out. I'd go pick up my kids and bring them home and go back to work and do dinner, and once I got my 8 hours in, I'd do dinner and then we'd start all over. Well, this time I was going to school and they would let me, I think I might have went part-time at this point, but it was more like per diem. It was more like not set to a certain 20 hours per week, but I dropped my insurance so I didn't have to do the 40 hours. And because I was, paying a high premium since I wasn't working in the office, I was paying a pretty high premium for me and my kids. And I thought, well, we're pretty healthy. Why not just drop my insurance? I'll pick it back up once I get hired into a hospital. I'll have better insurance anyway. And sure enough, let's fast forward 2 years, and I'm about to graduate. And I've got 6 weeks left, right? And I'm in surgery, and because last year you're doing your clinicals, you spend most of your time, even as nursing, you spend most of your time in the hospitals doing what your job you're going to do because you're basically learning on the job. And so I'm in the surgery room with the female surgeon and working side by side with her, passing the instruments to her, and we're talking back and forth. And this lady had breast cancer, and she was having a lymph node taken out of her arm, and they were testing to see if it had spread. And testing it to see if it was cancer. Sure enough, it was. I knew that I knew that being a nurse that I pretty sure that I had lymphoma at this point. But I didn't have insurance, so I didn't go to a doctor. But I knew that all my lymph nodes were swollen. I had tumors. I was hoping they were cysts, and though they were coming everywhere I had lymph nodes. That's where I was noticing them. In my growing, in my armpits, under my tonsils, in the back of my neck. And so sure enough, we were talking about this, and I asked her, I told her I knew somebody that had cysts, or that they thought maybe they were cysts in their lymph nodes. And she's like, no, 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 honey, no. You tell whoever it is that you tell them to go get checked, because the only thing that grows in your lymph nodes are tumors, and it's lymphoma. And I knew that there was two different kinds. There was non-Hodgkin's, which is systemic, from head to toe, or there was Hodgkin's, which was usually localized in one spot. And so I started doing a lot of research. I knew where all these locations were of my tumors, that I was probably stage 4. Again, no insurance, and I got 3 kids on my own, right? So this lady that I worked with, she was an older lady. She was a surgical assistant, and she worked with many of the surgeons. She knew that hospital. She had been working there many, many years. So, she kind of like was just treating me like I was her own daughter. And she's like, if you go to the clinic, I might be able to get you in there for free. And they may do some, you might be able to get some free stuff done since you're a student here. And so sure enough, we did. And the head surgeon, I'll never forget it. He was willing to, because I worked with him many times, he was willing to do a lymph node biopsy for me free of charge. But the hospital, unfortunately, I had to go under anesthesia, and I would have to pay for that. So because the medical bills were going to be pretty high for this, I didn't, he was telling me $20,000-$30,000 just for the anesthesia part of it alone. And so they were telling me what to do is get on Medicaid. I would have to go on the medical leave from work, because you had to show 30 days with no pay to qualify for Medicaid back then. So I was like, okay. So I did, and I got Medicaid, and all my bills were paid for. I did end up having stage 4 cancer. It was in my bone marrow. They basically said, my doctor said, my mom asked how long did I have. She pretty much thought I was gonna die, and I did too. But by this point, I went back to church. I kind of left that out. But when I went through my divorce, I went back to church, me and my kids, and so I gave my life back to the Lord. I knew I was going to go to heaven, and my mom was not a Christian, and we had gotten closer through this, though. She was taking me to my appointments, and she was taking my son and I when I ended up having to do chemo, and because all that was going to have to be paid for by Medicaid. I couldn't afford to do all that. Chemo, just these PET scans and CAT scans and bone marrow biopsies and all these tests, the doctor's offices, the blood work. This was going on, almost every week. And so there was no way I was going to be able to do that. So anyway, I go to church one day, and my mom's pretty much thinking I'm going to die, because the doctor told her that I had about 6 weeks to 6 months to live if the chemo, if it by miracle worked. That I was pretty full of cancer everywhere. And even 50% of my bone marrow, they had found out, these bone marrow biopsies, that it was full of cancer as well. And I had 6 weeks left to graduate. And I went to the Cleveland Clinic, and the head of the oncology department spent a couple of hours with me. And, we were just like, if there's any way I could just finish out my 6 weeks to graduate, because then I would get through that. I would have insurance after so many, 90 days. I was just trying to put off this chemo until I could get insurance, right? And he's like, I don't think you're going to live 6 weeks. You don't understand how bad this is. I don't think you're going to make it to graduation. If you don't start treatment now, you're not going to live those 6 weeks. And I was like, oh my gosh, is it that bad? Are you kidding me? I just went through 2 years of full-time school, full-time work, not even with a cold. I didn't call off one day by being sick, and you're telling me I got maybe 6 weeks? Oh my gosh, because of what the CAT scans and the PET scans showed. The tumors were so bad. And So I was like, okay, now I got these 3 kids. So they're telling me you need to go and get on Social Security. You need to get a will done, and because their dad is going to have to, take them if you don't make it. These kids you have to set it up to who's going to take custody of these children, right? So I didn't want their dad to take them because he was just pure evil. My mom wasn't a whole lot better because, these kids love to go to church. They love to go to church so much that my middle daughter, the one that was born early, if I didn't take her to church on Wednesday, she was throwing a fit. One day I came home to the cops in my driveway. My ex-husband called the cops on me because I took her to church. The little one, she wasn't real little by this point, but she was, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7. She had a cold, and so I was staying home. And the middle one is throwing a fit because she wants to go to her Wednesday night class. And my son was old enough to babysit. He wasn't real old himself either, but he was like 12, 13 maybe. And he's like, Mom, if you go ahead and take her to church, I'll stay home with Jasmine. And I was like, oh, I don't know. And he's like, she was already in bed because she didn't feel good. And I was like, okay, it was only an hour. I would be gone tops, hour and a half. And I was like, okay. So I took her to church. Jason stayed home with Jasmine. She stayed in bed. And sure enough, my ex-husband happened to call or something. I wanted to know where I was. I wasn't home. Jason's home. He answers the phone. And I come home and the cops are there. And I'm like, now what? So sure enough, it happened to be, though, this is how God has worked all these things out in my life. That's why it's a long testimony, but you got to see all the different ways that God had intervened in my life. Just so happens this cop now, I know him through, Jason knew him. These two are having a conversation. I'm like, how does Jason know this guy? Well, this guy's at Jason's school every single day, patrolling because of school, the fighting and stuff. So he was there through lunches, so kids weren't going in the bathroom smoking and all this. So these two know each other. And I know him because when I was a teenager, I was on the soccer. We had a girls soccer team in the area, and we had a boys soccer team in the area, but we didn't have another close soccer team for females to practice with, to scrimmage. And so we would scrimmage the boys team. Well, he was on the boys team. So I knew him for a couple of years from soccer. So sure enough, I come in and he's like, hey, and I'm like, hey, what are you doing here? He's like, well, your ex-husband called. I was like, oh, geez. So sure enough, he called the police because I had left Jasmine home by herself with Jason. Well, thank God, the law stated that he was old enough as a sibling to watch one of his siblings. So, the guy, nothing happened to me, but he did say, well, future reference, if I was you, I wouldn't do that again, because I would say about ex-husband who's got vendetta against you. And it's like, yeah, because I won't take him back. So he stole my dog. Our dog, he was jealous of our dog, and he stole the dog. Found out later that he took her and dropped her. She was in our backyard. He didn't even live with us. We weren't even together. And he came over to our house when I was gone at one of the treatments, and kids were at school, and he took our dog out of the backyard. And so that was a nightmare, going through that with the kids, praying with them at night so they could go to sleep at night because they were crying, hoping the dog would come back, and it wasn't coming back. And so anyway, just a lot of torment, a lot of torture for me and the kids, and this was no exception. And so so I go through all that, and my mom's going to take custody of these kids, right? So I go to church one day, and there's this speaker that came, and he claimed that he had the gift of healing. I went to a Pentecostal church back then, and I didn't know a whole lot about the gifts of the Holy Spirit and the manifested power of the Holy Spirit. I didn't know a lot about, and unfortunately, churches don't really teach on that enough, and even less so nowadays than they did back then. But I knew a lot about the Holy Spirit. I just didn't know a lot about the gifts of healing, the gift of prophecy, things like that. So he calls everybody up at the end of the service, and he's calling people up for back pain. He's going to pray over them. Our pastor and the elders are all going to pray, just like the Bible says. They anoint your head with oil, and they pray over you, just like the Bible instructs them to do. So I'm sitting there, and my friend's mom comes up to me. She was in the choir. She's like, "Get up there." And I was like, "Well, I don't." She knew I had cancer, and I was like, "Well, I don't have back pain." She's like, "I don't care. Just get up there." So I go up there, and I'm about in the middle, and he comes down the line, and he gets to me, and I didn't hear him say any of this to anybody else, but he said to me when he got to me, he goes, "I believe I have a word of the Lord for you." And I was like, "Wow, really?" I didn't know if to be scared or to be excited. I really, this is all new to me, And he tells me that I am going to have to go through these treatments, but that I will be healed. Now, this guy knew nothing about me. He was from like Texas or somewhere. He was not even from our state. I've never seen him before in my life. How did he know that I was going through treatments? He didn't. So I paid attention. I was like, wow, maybe the Lord really is saying that. He's like, you're going to be healed, but I had to go through the treatments. Well, going through those treatments, I was healed, by the way. Obviously, or I wouldn't be here right now. I learned so much going through those treatments. I learned so much financially that God did heal me, but He also financially took care of every bill. Remember, I was on medical leave. I had a house payment of $750 back then, plus all the utilities, plus I had car insurance. I didn't qualify for any kind of food assistance, so I had to pay for all the food. I didn't get child support. Hardly ever did I ever get child support. Once in a great while, I might got child support because the court was threatening him to take his license. So that might happen for a few months. And so anyway, God provided for about almost a full year. And I have a testimony on that already. I'm not going to go into great detail because we're already at an hour and a half, and I'm not going to go into great deal, but just know that God used this book. The author of this book, he was writing this book, and he was from Canton, and was on about faith and sickness, something to do like that. But again, I have a testimony on here about that. It's a testimony. There's not too many videos of me on here with Nelson, but I think it's one of the original ones. It may even be the one that was on his old channel. If you want to go and look at that, it's very, it is such a testimony in itself, a financial testimony, and man, I just watched God. I had learned so much about the Lord going through these. I would never ever go, if I had a chance to go through all this all over again, I wouldn't change a thing. I learned so much about God, the miracles that He was doing in my life. All of them. Even when I wasn't being faithful to Him, He was faithful to me. And now, let's fast forward a little bit, get past the cancer. I did get healed. I went through the chemo for 8 months. I did lose my hair. I was very sick, but I did get healed. Financially, every bill was taken care of. It's just amazing with that. So amazing. What a miracle that God did with that. If you want to, any kind of questions with that, I can always do a video just answering your questions on that if you'd like. But so then I meet Nelson. He happens to be his daughter, his youngest daughter, and my youngest daughter were best friends. They were in middle school together. And so I'm taking his youngest daughter and my youngest daughter and my middle daughter. We were going to jazzercise. Pretty much I'd pick her up and we'd go after school and I'd drop her back off. And the youngest one, it was more of a fun thing for them. Me and my middle daughter were taking it very seriously, but the young ones were just back there laughing and playing around. And so anyway, that didn't last too long. But she spent a lot of time over at our house on the weekends. My kids spent a lot of time at his house on the weekends. I worked a lot on the weekends because we would, in order to get the reports done for Monday, they would pay a lot of bonus money if we got behind, and pretty much seemed like every weekend we were behind. And so they would offer a lot of money if you would work overtime on the weekends. So I made a lot of money on the weekends. So Nelson was very kind to my girls. My youngest one was grounded a lot because she went to do her homework, and so she didn't get to go all the time. But my middle one was there a lot, probably almost every weekend. But they, like I said, they were only a year apart, so they were really good friends, all three of these girls. And so Nelson and his ex, they divorced, and he was working for this lady, and he ends up moving, him and his two kids. He was raising them on his own. And he ends up moving out to another city, probably about 20 minutes to a half hour away from us. And his daughter was having her birthday party and wanted the girls to come to her birthday party. So I took him out there, and Nelson was kind enough to say, well, if you want to just hang out, so you don't have to come back in a couple hours, because I really, it was a long drive. So I did. I just kind of hung out, and we just talked and laughed, and kids were silly. Well, I really got to see how he was a dad. He was a really... I really admired him as a single dad. Was really getting to see this. I was like, wow. It's a shame there aren't too many guys like this. It's a shame my kids didn't have a dad like this, right? And they didn't. My kids' dad didn't really have much to do with them. It was kind of in and out, but mostly out. And here I am watching this man, raise these kids, and he's having this big birthday party for his daughter, and. So after the birthday party, we go home, and or I go home. I don't even think the girls came with me. I think they stayed there. But so anyway, I go home, and not too long later, a few maybe days later or something, I take the kids to school. I come back, and I got this message on the answering machine, and I seen on the caller ID it was Nelson Robbins. When I thought, well, his son's name was Nelson as well. And I thought, well, what's Junior calling me for? And didn't think it was him. Sure enough, it was him. Left a voicemail. And so he asked me out on a date. But, well, it was kind of just not really a date. Okay. It was just for coffee. I want to know if I'd go and have a cup of coffee with him. Well, it's funny, Nelson, you don't even drink coffee. I didn't think you drank coffee back then. He didn't drink coffee very often. Now he does, but not back then he didn't. So anyway, but he knew I did. So I kind of turned him down at first. And my kids, I kind of thought it would be a little odd for them, how would this work? And so I told the kids, that what had happened when they come home from school, and they didn't really... you kind of didn't get a feel one way or another if they were okay with this or not. So let's move forward. Let's say months later. It's like, almost a year now. About a year? 2 years, about a year. Maybe a year and a half. It's Easter time. And I worked on the holidays too, most of them. The only one I got off was Christmas, because at the company I worked for, if you worked Thanksgiving, you could have off Christmas. Well, I worked every Thanksgiving so that I could have Christmas with the kids off. And my grandma would always do Thanksgiving anyway, so I thought, well, I'll work, and then we go over there and eat dinner. So it worked out fine for me every year. Well, this Easter, remember, Easter is a big deal, to celebrate because of Jesus. And so his daughter calls me and wants to know, she's coming to visit her mom for Easter, and she wanted to know if she could come visit the girls since we live in the same area. I was like, oh yeah, absolutely. Just let me know, because I got to work that day, and I might run to the store to get stuff for dinner. So let me know for sure you're coming, and you could just eat. She could eat dinner with us. So if she wanted to. So anyway, she ends up not coming. So she asked if she can come. Gosh, what was it, like one day during the next week, Nelson? Yeah. And so she's going to have her dad bring her. I was like, okay. Well, come to find out, these three girls are plotting this meeting with Nelson and I, because they're trying to get us together. And one of the girls had this idea, well, wouldn't it be great if they, because of the birthday party, getting to know them a little bit, and him a little bit, him being on his own now for quite a while, and me being on my own for a while. And these girls spend a lot of time together. They're thinking, well, why don't we get them together? So they come over. They spent hours. We're laughing, and we had a lot of fun. His daughter, youngest daughter, is so funny. She could be a comedian. Her and the girls, they were just so funny together. You just couldn't help but laugh. Some of the stuff they did, it was hilarious. And so he ends up not leaving until like 1 o'clock that morning. Your phone's falling down again. So anyway, we end up dating, and we end up fast forward about a year later.
Good.
We get married, and we move in. We move into this house now. One of Nelson's videos, it was the one that him and I are together, not the most recent one we did yesterday, but the one before that. And I think he says on there something like, you know, how do you tell her that you're moving into a house that's demonic, you know, or it's got this demonic activity going on it? Well, no, I would have not moved in there. He could have moved, you know, they could have moved in with us, but our house is smaller. So it was much more, it'd be better, yes, if we moved into his house.
Plus, the schools were better.
Yeah, the schools were better out there too, as well. You're right. Our school system wasn't. It was bad. There was even a gang, you know, at the high school when kids went
But I
to.
didn't think this stuff was gonna.
But he, you know,
Manifest into that.
he didn't think it was going to get worse. You know, he thought that we moved in there, it would probably get better. But so anyway, we move in, and it starts getting worse, and we start noticing all kinds of things, and it was progressively getting worse. It got to the point where Nelson and I were being scratched. He was being scratched. He had scratched come down his back, like 3 claw marks. They weren't even like regular fingernail scratches. You know, they weren't wide enough. And it was more like, oh gosh, like a pin of a needle or something. They were that, like razor, you know, like claws that you would have, and that's how the 3 would go down his back. And then we're standing there talking and doing laundry, and I get scratched on my legs. We had shorts on, and you know, rocks were being. One day we were doing a family night, and everybody was in the living room. And I was getting the popcorn, and I was coming in from the kitchen. In the dining room, we had a kitchen table. And we had these this bowl with these decorative rocks in it. And his daughter and I were talking, so she was looking at me as I was coming in, and I was talking to her and bringing the popcorn. And all of a sudden, as I got past that bowl, a rock came up out of that bowl and was thrown at me. And obviously, this thing didn't want me and the girls there. It got worse when we moved in, and so, you know, his daughter seen it, and she's like, "Oh my gosh!" And I heard it fall because we had a tile floor, and I was like, "What in the world?" She goes, "I saw it." She goes, "It's like it was thrown at you," and I was like, "Well, there was nobody else in the dining room but me, so obviously we couldn't see it, but we saw the rock flying in the air, and I heard it hit the floor, and so these are just examples. Well, it got so bad that Nelson had this well, we thought it was a priest at his work, and come to find out that was a whole another story. The priest had been dead for years, but he clearly was at Nelson's work. He gave Nelson prayer to say at the house. He gave him holy water. I was there and watched him come home with holy water. And which turned black, by the way, in the house with a few days. We went to go get it, and we were going to put it.
Disappeared.
Oh yeah, it
found
was
it in the
gone,
cabinet.
and Nelson found it in the cabinet. But we were going to put it over every window and over every door, like this priest told us to, and say a prayer. Well, when Nelson went to get it, it had turned black, and we were like, oh, I knew because of church. When I was going back to church, I was at this in the Sunday school class, and it was a spiritual warfare class. So I had learned a lot about evil, a lot about spiritual warfare, and by this time, and but at this point in time that Nelson and I were together, I had, because of work, because of the cancer, I had one event led to another, and I stopped going to church. It was at my mom's. You know, I did chemo on Friday, be at her house for 3 days for sick because I was so sick. So Sunday kind of came and went, and so I wasn't in church at this point. But it wasn't that long ago that I was in church and learning spiritual warfare. And sure enough, it started getting worse. I mean, we come in and all the cabinets would be open. Nelson was seeing spiritual things, happening. He was seeing, like he's always been able to see this since he was a kid. Well, he was witnessing demonic activity, the spirits, like shadowy figures, and one little girl that he would see in the hallway. Our crosses on the wall were being turned upside down. Our daughters, all 3 daughters, shared the basement bedroom, and it was real big. And the bed being pulled out from the wall into the middle of the room. We heard it. We were upstairs. What was that, Monopoly we were playing?
Yeah.
We were playing a board game, and we heard this racket going on downstairs, and we were like, what in the world? Because the dining room table was at the top of the basement steps. It's not like you couldn't hear it. And the what was that? The boombox that kicked on?
My laptop.
Oh, your laptop. That's right. Nelson had this laptop that he would download music on, and you could burn CDs back then. And you could put it on your iPod or what were those things called? Those little music things
I think
that
it's
the kids
iPod.
have. What's it called, iPod?
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's how we downloaded music back then. And so anyway, he had his laptop nearby so we could listen to some songs as we were playing this game. And all of a sudden, it died, right? Didn't it die for a while?
Yeah, because I left the cord at work.
Yeah,
it's
so it
not
wasn't
like I
even
couldn't charge
working. And all of a sudden it kicked on, and it was Lionel Richie saying, Hello. It was singing that song, Hello. I'll never forget. And me and the kid, we were all just like, oh my gosh. There was a knock at the door. Nobody opened the door, though. There was nobody there.
Yeah, that's when the song, that's
Hello
when it
came
changed
on.
song. It went from hello to you keep on knocking, but you can't come in.
Yes. So I knew that this was trouble, even though we couldn't see it. So anyway, this thing started manifesting into the body of Nelson, and it happened 3 times. And the first time was a very short period of time, but the kids and I had witnessed it. And the reason I think was because this priest, we had this camera. We started setting up these camera. So when we left, we would see what was going on, and trying to see if we could see any activity going on in the house. So Nelson set up, like I said, these cameras, and sure enough, it started getting worse. And well, we didn't know it but we think that we were, the more that we were, I don't know if you say interested or fascinated by it. Kind of fascinated of the unknown sort of thing. Not that it was, that we were like in any kind of evil. It was just like, what in the world's going on here? And never experienced it. So it was a kind of an interest that you had a fascination with, but a scary kind of fascination. And what I had learned was that demons, which is in the Bible, Jesus casted the demon from the man who had legions of demons. Remember this story, that he was naked and they chained him up on this island because he was evil and he was wicked and he was had strength and he was harmful and he was causing harm to people. So the town chained him up. And as Jesus and the disciples came in on the boat, Jesus made the demons say who it was, and it said that the name was legions. Well, we learned that legions of like 1,000 at least. And anyway, Jesus casted out the demons, and they wanted to go into the nearby pigs, and so Jesus allowed that, but those pigs went in and drowned it into the water. So we know that demons will will enter into a human, and they usually take on the Godhead, which is the man is the Godhead, the husband, the father. It's all spiritual. They are the Godhead of the family, of the household. So, and wife, you are submissive to him. He is submissive to God. So, it makes sense that Satan would use the Godhead to try to destroy the family unit, try to bring division, if not take his life. Probably trying to take his life, but also to divide the family, divide the husband and wife, because you become one flesh when you marry, and that is sacred to God. Man and woman, get married as one flesh with God. You become one. So anyway, the second time it happened, it was a little longer, and the third time it happened was even longer, and it was so bad the third time. It was so bad. Now Nelson didn't, he didn't know any of this. He didn't know this was going on in his body. It was just the craziest thing, but it was very real. And so it, like the living room became destroyed, and it wasn't allowed to hurt. Obviously, it wasn't allowed to hurt the kids even though it was tormenting them, it took my daughter's arm and thought he was going to rip it off. He was showing us that he had this strength that humans don't have. And this thing with the pinky would flipped up. We had this huge coffee table, heavy, and a human finger, the pinky finger, was not lifting this by any means and flipping it over, but it did. And we had these microphones that the priest had given with the cameras. It came with a microphone system, and Nelson had that set up nearby, and it was that real hard plastic. And this thing took it in the hand, one hand. I watched it. We all watched it, and took this one hard plastic microphone and crumbled it like powder. It was like, okay, I knew at this point this was evil. This was demonic. This was either Satan, or I didn't know exactly the extent, if it was Satan or if it was just demon, what was going on here. But I knew that his body was being taken over. And so when this would happen, we had Psalm 23 plaque on the wall. And the one time it happened, the first time I think it went down the steps and my daughter slammed the door on it. And it flew. I watched it because it wasn't quite shut yet. It was shutting, and I could see. I had a direct vision, and I had the daughter, his youngest daughter, because she's like freaking out. But I knew that this wasn't him because his eyes were not blue. They were like black. So I knew that this wasn't him. And I knew enough about the spiritual warfare class that this was not him. This had entered in to try to destroy and cause, havoc. So the daughter, you can just imagine that she's thinking this was her dad. I'm like, it's not your dad, it's not your dad, it's not your dad. Look at that and read from the beginning to the end. And when you get to the end, start back over again, read. And it was Psalms 23. The Lord is our shepherd, we shall not want. He maketh me lie down in green pasture. He restored my soul. Anyway, all the way down. And she gets to the end and start over again. And this way, it took her mind off what was going on with her dad, And I'm like, it's not your dad. You can't understand. This is not your dad. And this thing has taken over. And so, as my daughter went to shut the door, I'm telling you, flew up them steps in a matter of 1 second. And as the door was shutting, it did this to the door, and a hole went through the door. There was no way a human could do that. As the door is shutting, it would have just opened, and it put a fist hole through the door. So now you can imagine. Remember, the living room is got a microphone. All at this point, the microphone is all crumbled to the ground. We had drinks on the coffee table, so when that thing lifted and through the coffee table, drinks went down the hall. They went all over and all I could do, and it was summertime, so we had our sliding glass doors open. Our living room was here, then the dining room, and they had sliding glass doors open to go to the outside. And I had these flowy white curtains, and they were shut. And I just kept calling on the Holy Spirit, anything that came to my mind. Michael, the archangel. I was calling on Jesus. Nelson's son and I both. He was a churchgoer at the time with his girlfriend and their family, and we were that's all I could think of to do. Is the kids had they were all sitting on the couch. We had 2 dogs that were miraculously not barking, not growling, not doing anything, but just staying there. So I had them just make sure the dogs. I was afraid they would get hurt. I didn't know what to expect, if we were going to live or die. I thought we were all going to die. I truly did. And so we just kept calling on the Lord, calling on this third time lasted about an hour and a half, and it was just pure torture. And so so all of a sudden, I'm watching because I'm sitting on the couch and I could see my stepson could see it too, and we could see the curtains open, and couldn't see anything come in. And all of a sudden we hear the voice. Now, it wasn't Nelson's voice, but we heard this creepy, satanic, demonic voice go, "Miko." And I was like, I knew that was Michael, the archangel. but remember, I'm calling on him. We're praying. And I'm just like telling my stepson, keep praying, keep calling out for, because he knew enough too. And we were just praying. If scripture came to the mind, we'd speak it. And, and this thing must not have been allowed to torment, must not have been allowed to hurt us, because he was tormenting and he was trying to twist my daughter's arm at some point. But I was just hoping to God that he wouldn't rip it off, because he had this kind of strength. I'd already noticed this. And it wasn't human. And there's no way, I know as a nurse, there's no way a human being has this kind of strength that I'm watching. And I know very well that demons can take over, and they will take over the man's body, because man is the strongest, and they want that strength. So, sure enough, Michael comes in. We can't see, but we're watching this demonic figure interact with the archangel, and we're all watching. There was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us, me and the 4 kids. And this thing out of now, Nelson is like, what were you, about 250 at this point? 240 maybe?
240.
240 at this point, 240 pounds. And he kind of has turned and he's looking at Michael. So I know he sees it. And I'm watching. All of a sudden, this 240-pound body gets lifted up in the air, flipped around, and thrown on the love seat. Thank God, you got thrown on the love seat, because his body didn't get hurt. And I'm going, oh my gosh, that was Michael. And I know that biblically, that was probably the pronunciation was Michael. And this thing called it Michael. And I was like, oh, it's got to be Michael. So sure enough, once that happened, it was like, I didn't know if he was alive or dead. I thought he was dead. I didn't know enough to know if this person could take the life, if this thing could take the life out of the body. And then all of a sudden, it went down on the floor, on its belly, and starts slithering. That's the way it looked like. Just starts slithering like a snake going toward the front door. And I was like, oh my gosh, because Junior, we were about to go to a hotel. I didn't know what to do. I just knew I had to get these kids out of here, and we had to go to safety. So we were about to go to a hotel. I said, okay, guys, we're just going to go to a hotel. It was like a Saturday night, I think. So sure enough, here this thing starts slithering across. And I was like, I don't even remember if it went out the door or not, but it was slithering towards the front door. And so we ended up going to bed. We ended up not going to the hotel, because I think it did go out and it came back. And anyway, I was just like, I didn't really, we were just thrown for a loop. I just don't even know what words to say. I can't even find the right words. But we were all, I was like, okay, so everything's done. Everything's over. It was about an hour or two later. It was laying on the couch. Like I think Nelson was back in the body. There was no more activity after Michael, that this has happened. And it was sleeping on the couch. So I was like, I'm just going to go to bed. The kids are going to go to bed. I'm going to take our chance that we're safe. I didn't know what else to do. And we wake up in the morning, right? Nelson comes in and he goes, what in the world happened out here? And I was like, so I knew he didn't know. And I was like, he's like, what is all this mess out here? There was cups and liquid and pop, and
The hardwood floors were a mess.
The hardwood floors were a mess. Crumbled up microphone all over the ground. I mean, furniture moved. It was like a tornado had come through there. I'm not even joking you. The table moved over onto its side, and I was like, okay, he doesn't even know. Thank God we got this little camera for Tammy Sue was it her birthday? It was her birthday.
Your birthday.
Was it Christmas?
I think it was Christmas.
Her birthday's right after Christmas, so it was either Christmas or birthday. She wanted this little camera. And so we got her this it's like a little video camera. She was videoing it. And I didn't even know, because, you're so focused on what's going on. She was videoing this whole scenario. Thank God, because we had proof of what happened. Because try to tell this to your husband that this just happened in your body. And he was so freaked out about it. I mean, I would be too. I'm like, what do you mean? I could have killed my family. I could have hurt my family, my kids. What do you? No, there's no way. And he was so upset hearing this. And I was like, Nelson. So sure enough, it was on video, and he was freaking out. I mean, he was so sad of what he was watching. I was like, Nelson, it wasn't you. He didn't understand what I knew from learning 6 months of spiritual warfare class. This was all new to him. And trying to tell him that this demonic, now he did know this activity was going on in the house, but that this thing had now taken over his body, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And so anyway, guys, what I want to say is that is when I said to Nelson, I said, listen, this is God telling me, get your life right with me. No more playing around. No more back and forth. This is it. This is for real. This is the first time I had ever seen any kind of demonic activity in my life. And I knew it was very real now. I'm learning about it, and now all of a sudden it's happening. And I said to Nelson, I said, I am going back to church with or without you. I'm going. And I knew I was going. I had a house. If him and I didn't work out through all this, I had my house. I was going back to church with or without you. And he's like, well, I'm not letting you go by yourself. So I'll go with you. And so that is our beginning of when him and I and the kids started going back to church. And we've been full throttle ever since. Because we know, Nelson knows more than I do. But what I experienced was enough. And Nelson has experienced it since he was a kid. And you know his testimony. You know his journey. God saving him through attempted suicide. And now saving him through that as well. And saving us as well. I knew that we had no business playing around anymore with this. This is very real. And even though I can't see it, I've seen the effects of it. And I've seen what this thing was doing to our family and to Nelson now. Now it's taking bodily form. And we can have that. And so, sure enough, guys, we got out of that house. We gave our lives back to the Lord. We actually all got baptized except for the stepson. He was already going to church with his girlfriend and their family. So me, Nelson, and the 3 girls all got baptized together. And this was the beginning of our new journey. Unfortunately, the kids, once they all moved out and went their separate ways, they did not. They're none of them are living for the Lord. Faithfully, they've all gotten into drugs and alcohol, and it's very sad. So if you guys would do us a huge favor, if you would put them on your prayer list, we pray for them. I know God is, even if it happens to be on their deathbed, I do hope in God that they don't get left behind. If we were to get raptured right now, I would love to see them be raptured as well, as we all want that for our family members, and God doesn't will for any of us to perish. Neither do we. So, my testimony, I'm going to wrap this up. It's 2 hours at this point. I just want you to know.
Dang, I told you guys 2 hours.
I didn't think it was going to take that long. But I told Nelson, this is a lifetime testimony you're wanting me to do here. But there's so many things that Nelson and I have been through in our lives. It is important that you raise your children up in the Lord. They don't have to go through some of the things that Nelson and I had to unfortunately go through. Raise your grandchildren up in the Lord. Like Nelson said, get into their lives. Know who they're hanging out with. I don't care if you're the only parent in a 5-mile radius that's willing to crack down on your kids, and if you have to take their phones away, you take them away. If you have to take away the internet, you take it away. If you have to put passwords on, if you have to give them time limits, get them off these games that are Call of Duty and stuff that bring on demonic activity. They do, guys. They absolutely do. And any kind of those satanic shows, movies, games, know what your kids are doing. Do not allow this into your household, and don't allow it into their lives. If you think they're suspecting drugs, you can go out and buy a drug test. You can buy them over the counter these days, and you can make your child follow the rules in your house. and do their homework. You know, you got to be involved in these kids' lives. You are parent, not them. They don't get the control. And if they aren't willing to live and abide by your rules and they turn 18, out they go. Because, you know, it's a privilege at that point. Once you turn 18, you graduate high school, and you turn, you know, it's a privilege for you to live at home with your parents now. You know, we are only responsible until a certain age to raise these kids. By that point on, you know, we as parents need to be good parents and mold and sculpt these kids to be ready to get jobs after high school, to take care of a bank account after high school, and have bills and cars, and, you know, to become a responsible adult, following the laws, following the rules, and live a, you know, hopefully a Christian life, you know, a godly life, and be faithful to the Lord because He's faithful. So anyway, guys, you know, Nelson and I live by that scripture. You know, I think I know it's in Mark and I know it's in Luke. I just can't tell you. You can Google it, but it said it in both places. The Lord's talking about, you know, they want to, how you be a disciple of God, and He said, Jesus' explanation was, you have to deny yourself. You have to pick up your cross and follow Him daily. He didn't say once a week or once a month or only at church. He says daily. You deny yourself, you pick up your cross, and you follow Him daily. You have a relationship with Him because He can't protect you if you aren't willing to pick up your cross and follow Him. He cannot be your umbrella of protection. And read Psalm 91. He will absolutely, if you are willing to abide in the secret place of the Most High, you will abide in the shadow of the wings of the Almighty God. No evil shall befall you. He will put angels in guard around you. He will cover you with His feathers. So anyway, you will be well protected, well provided for. You know, I could go and quote scripture after scripture after scripture. What God tells us to do. Cast your cares onto Him because He cares for you. That's in 1 Peter. You know, I'm sure it's other places, maybe worded a little different, maybe worded exactly the same. But my point is, He is our Lord, the Lord of your life. He will be Lord of your circumstances. He will be Lord of every moment of every breath that He gives you, and every moment that you are here on the earth. He will take care of you. He will work out the situations of your life to work them up, because He will cause them to work together for your good if you love Him, because Romans 8:28 says, all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to His purpose. All things work together for the good for those who love Him, for those who are called according to His purpose. That's you, guys. If you love Him, that's you. That's you. All things. He's going to work it all together. You're going to go through some trials. You absolutely will, because that's what refines us. That's what gets out the old fleshy ways of us and changes us to be godly. You know, it's like gold that has to go through the fire to get the impurities out, to make it strong, or any metal probably for that matter. The Bible talks about God being a potter, and we are His clay. You know, you go through the fire to strengthen that clay. Otherwise, it's just going to wilt to nothing. But you are His workmanship and His masterpiece. And He's going to mold and sculpt you to be a beautiful masterpiece. Yeah. But you're going to have to go through some things, you know? Yeah. But He'll go through them with you, and He'll give you everything you need to take you through. Just let Him be your good shepherd. Everything. And you shall not want. You shall not lack. And He will, His goodness and mercy will follow you all the days of your life. And you will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. That's the beginning of Psalm 23 and the end of it. But you can read it for yourself. And pray it. Pray it over yourself, over your spouse, your family, your children, whatever. So anyway, that being said, I hope that this testimony just shows you I know it's long, but God has worked in my life in so many ways, even through so many horrible parts of my life, I guess. You know, I can look back and see that God was working it out. He was working it out for good. You know, unfortunately, I wasn't faithfully living under the protection of the Lord. You know, it was in sin, and I wasn't living a sinless life, trying to. but he still was working in my life. I don't know if I would have went to heaven if I died at those times in my life that I wasn't following him. I don't know. I had sin, so probably I highly doubt I would have been in heaven. But he spared my life. There was many times I should have drinking and driving, fighting. There's many times I should have been. I shouldn't be here, and I'm so thankful for His grace and His mercy. He did not allow me to die in that state, so that I can be given. And He chose me to be His bride. I like to say His queen, since He's my king. I just kind of, He just kind of felt like He showed me that one day. Well, if you're my king, I guess I'm your queen. Well, anyway, I don't know if that's true or not, but I like to think so. So anyway, I love you guys. If there's anything you want to know more, let me know, and we can make a short video on that. I'm not more about doing videos like Nelson is, but anyway, I love you all. I hope this helps. And I'm gonna hand this over to Nelson. It's his phone and his channel. Under God.
Well,
Told him it would be long.
she outsurpassed me. Told you.
Yeah, normally I would not, but this is a lifetime worth of
Right.
testimony, and we should have we should have more than one testimony. I mean, I could break those all up into many different testimonies. I just kind of ran it all together, for the sake of time, I guess.
Well, that being said, it takes you on a journey what sin does to your life, what you allow into your life,
Being unequally yoked.
and it teaches you, we all fall into relationships that's not so great because we don't seek God, and then you learn over the times that you break up with someone and life changes and you try not to find that person again, but somehow it always seems like we go after the same things that we have learned over and over. The devil, because it's those watchers. He puts those in place. They watch you. They know you better than yourself. They know where to put you. They know how to put friends in your life, and that will lead you because it's like that whispering noise that they just don't stop until you do whatever the heck they want.
Mm-hmm.
But we've all had friends like that. We've all been into dark places, and maybe some of you haven't. But praise God for that. Praise
Right.
God that you haven't struggled today, that you didn't have food on your table or what you was going to worry
Right.
about.
You didn't go through drugs and alcohol.
Going to pick up your child from baseball or whatever, and dogs knocking spaghetti all over the floor and coming home crying and thinking, I'm going to kill these dogs. No, she didn't think all that.
That did happen.
But it did happen. But either way,
I think I did cry because now I'm like, oh my
I would've.
all my dinner for these kids.
them dogs would have
on
ran.
the floor. I had to take them to Taco Bell. They didn't mind.
All but Mocha. Mocha, she
was part of crying.
she would have got a treat. She would've got a treat. She was my
This
baby.
dog would climb up on the table if I left anything on the table. If she
That was
knew how to
acceptable.
climb up on a chair.
She was.
One day I pulled into the driveway and there she is in the window. I was like, oh my gosh, Mocha's on the dining room table. She'd ate a whole pizza. Her and that small dog.
That's acceptable. Mocha was my baby, so she was allowed to do whatever she wanted.
Yeah, she was a really awesome dog.
But either way, guys,
She was a genius.
God bless you. Thank you again for watching. Thank you for being here. Comment, like she said, she'll answer any kind of questions or anything that you have, or maybe even something that triggered your thought that, even like you guys have done with me. Well, what about here? What happened between here and here? And it happens because you're trying to go from a little girl all the way up. But, sometimes you got to look at how God moves you around, and, the paths that's crossed, and I've even asked her, wow, you think we would have ran into each other. But in those days, you're looking at, I wouldn't even entertain anything at that point because I was in a dark of beyond dark, and it wasn't no good. I knew by watching, like she mentioned that video.
Remember that church that my brother would walk me to was the church that you
I ran to.
That you ran to.
But I knew by watching the video
what saddened me so much is I knew what those things were capable of doing. And I knew once it was entering my personal body, you know, and that's the one that I touched on that one video saying I just was done. You know, you got to promise me this, but I wanted it in writing. And I don't ever recommend, I don't tell you guys this to think, okay, well, I can do this. You're making a deal with the devil. It's like trying to go out there and play Russian roulette. Eventually, somebody's going to get shot. I mean, something's going to happen. And, you know, but I knew if maybe if the events would change, they would change. But again, just like she said, instead they've gotten worse. You know, the demons, they come back and come back. You know, you get rid of one, it comes back with 7, you got 8. And, you know, we've been there on these videos. So either way, God bless you guys. I hope you get a lot from this video. And again,
because I didn't even touch on the fact of my best friend dying from drugs and alcohol. That car
there
accident.
probably will be a part 2. So anyways, guys,
The drugs and alcohol her and I were doing.
God bless you. Love you. Until the next one.
Love you. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.